Peter, I'm joined now by Alex Nuttall, and he is a former MP, retired, but he is also, these days, campaign manager for Peter MacKay. Alex Nuttall, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me here today.
Let's start off with, give us your appraisal of what the chances are as we await the final result.
Which chances would those be?
The chance of your man, Peter MacKay, winning it.
Look, we obviously are fairly confident. I think that when I say that with this caveat that as you go through these races, there's always surprises. We don't know what is in the ballot box. The voting took place over a long period of time, and so that can create some tension and some nervousness. But we're confident that we did a great job, and we're confident that Peter has done an incredible job getting his message out and ensuring that Canadians and Conservatives are aligned and they're ready for an 8-point jobs plan that will put Canadians back to work and get on the road to take down Justin Trudeau.
Some people are saying when we watch the first ballot result, the crucial thing will be, does Peter MacKay have enough of a lead? Because if he doesn't, some of the conventional wisdom is that it's his to lose because Erin O'Toole might risk having more people come to him on second and third ballot. What do you make of that analysis?
Well, look, I think there's two things about that analysis. There's two ways that we can grow and support. Number one, we can grow through attrition, meaning people aren't putting down ballot support to either Erin or ourselves. And the other thing is, I think that we've done an incredible job of reaching out to supporters of Leslyn and Derek. And if it is Erin we're against on the final ballot, I think that you'll see quite a pocket of support there for us. And at the same time, if Leslyn or Derek happens to surpass Erin, I know that there's a lot of like-minded individuals who support Peter and Erin, and we're ready to move forward as soon as the result's in.
A lot of people talk about the support on second and third ballot, or as you call it, down ballot, from social conservatives, Leslyn Lewis and Derek Sloan. A lot of people have suggested that Erin O'Toole has made more direct overtures to the social conservative vote. For example, also he has said he has reservations about the government's legislation to deal with, to ban conversion therapy. Also, he suggested the abortion debate when it comes to sex-selective abortion, and Peter's not sort of been in those fields. So what do you make of the analysis that socialist conservatives would be more likely to go to Erin O'Toole?
Well, look, I look back through the race and I see that Peter was honest, open. He went directly and said, this is who I am, this is what I believe in, this is what you'll get with me as leader. And I can tell you as a social conservative that the honesty that he has come forth with has really broken through. And I think social conservatives, if their person is not on the final ballot, that they will put Peter MacKay in that placing because they believe him. They know that he's going to do what he says he's going to do. He's made lots of overtures in terms of religious freedoms around the world, in terms of making sure that no government in the future ever tries to put a values test on summer funding for churches and mosques, etc. We've done a lot of work in terms of allowing the freedoms that are afforded our members of Parliament and in Parliament to be secured and to ensure that no one's pushed around again in the future. So I think that these things really did blow through, and I expect that we'll see a better than anticipated result in social conservative support down ballot.
Let's talk about the other issue, and you know it because you're his campaign manager. You know it because you were there in the first months of the campaign when the elephant in the room was that a certain number of conservatives were saying we can't support Peter MacKay because we don't think he's conservative enough. He's a red Tory, he's more of the PC, the progressive conservative tradition, and you had Erin O'Toole even saying, I'm true blue. Has he dealt with that?
Well, look, I think that when Erin O'Toole and his campaign run around saying Peter MacKay is one thing or another, that's just part of their campaign strategy. We just chalk it up to that. I think that Conservatives and Canadians know who Peter MacKay is. Peter MacKay is the guy who came forth with mandatory minimum sentences for sex offenders. Peter MacKay is the man who helped lead our military through the war in Afghanistan. Peter MacKay is the man who went out in the international stage and didn't embarrass us like this current government is. And so Conservatives know who Peter MacKay is, that he's a strong Conservative, that he put aside his own leadership to create this new party and ensure that we were getting Stephen Harper elected into government in 2006.
If your man wins, if Peter MacKay wins this leadership, and if we see him behind you at those flags in a little while, addressing the media as the new leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, what do you think he should do in terms of that looming confidence vote on just after September 23rd, after the government introduces its throne speech. There's going to be a confidence vote. Should he, according to you, should he be pushing the caucus to vote non-confidence and provoke an election?
Well, look, here's what I know about Peter MacKay. He's not going to go out there and make a decision on an election or a confidence vote that is in the best interests of just the Conservative Party or Conservative MPs. He's going to weigh what the legislation is. He's going to determine in a thoughtful process whether we want to support it or not. And he's going to ensure that as we go forth, we're doing what's right for Canadians. Because only when we're putting Canadians first will we be able to win enough of their support, their confidence to form government in the next election.
Practical question. If he wins, you'll be waiting for a way of getting him into Parliament. You'll be waiting for a by-election. I don't know what's on the horizon. One would think his preference might be Atlantic Canada. What are the plans? What's the thinking? What are the scenarios?
Well, look, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Obviously, step one is to win tonight. And step two, let's talk about later in the week.
Okay, we will watch with interest. Alex Nuttall, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Peter, I'm joined now by David Piccini. He is a member of the provincial government, the Doug Ford Conservative government at Queen's Park, and he's also one of the chief Ontario organizers for Erin O'Toole. Dave Piccini, first of all, what do you make of your man's chances?
Well, Martin, we're feeling confident tonight. Erin's built a real winning team from coast to coast to coast. He's got a number of young people. That's been one of the real takeaways for me. As a younger member of provincial parliament here in Ontario, the young team that Erin's built speaks to how he resonates with millennials, but really speaks to the big blue tent party that we've got in the Conservative Party of Canada and the vision he's got for Canada. He really backs his policy with a real intellectual depth, which appeals to many of us.
A lot of the people are saying that if this goes to a second and a third ballot, one of the key factors is going to be where supporters of Leslyn Lewis and Derek Sloan in this scenario, where they would go, and they are social conservatives. I know Erin O'Toole made a fairly substantial pitch to social conservatives. Do you think he has secured their vote down ballot on the second and third ballots?
Well, I think Erin has said to all conservatives of all stripes, you have a home in an Erin O'Toole government, and really built that big blue tent. So yes, I do. I'm not surprised in the slightest that a number of other candidates and supporters of other candidates are putting Erin as number two. But again, I think it speaks to winnability here. Erin is ready to take on Prime Minister Trudeau. Erin is ready to offer a much more positive vision, scandal-free for Canadians.
Early in the, relatively early in the campaign, about 2.5 months ago, Erin O'Toole released a tweet saying that he would he would reduce and eliminate fossil fuel subsidies to the oil industry. He rescinded that within a day or two, and then he came under attack from Peter MacKay because Mr. O'Toole said he would be a stalwart supporter of the oil and gas sector. What happened with that? Why would he say one thing one day and then retract it? I mean, there was a clear tweet saying he was going to phase out. That's a commitment that Canada's made under the G20 and G8. Why would he change his position on that?
Well, I think first and foremost on oil and gas, I think we have to support our robust oil sector, and I don't think that doesn't mean that we can't also, as a country, position ourselves to meet our targets. To push for more renewals. Erin does have a clear policy on the environment, and it's really appealed to me. I think one of the big things we need, Martin, across Canada is a real infrastructure to go green, and I know to that end our ICIP program, Investing in Canada Infrastructure, that we work with the federal government. I look forward to hopefully having Erin in government to invest post-COVID in green infrastructure and in infrastructure that's going to get this economy going again.
If Erin O'Toole wins, do you think it will be because he's persuaded or he's benefited by enough Conservatives feeling that Peter MacKay is not enough of a true blue Conservative? Because Mr. O'Toole's been saying, I am the true blue Conservative. So is that a victory of his argument that Peter MacKay is not a good enough Conservative?
No, I think we're all going to unite regardless of who wins tonight. But what I think it is Erin is a true blue Conservative. Erin's message has appealed to Canadians from coast to coast to coast. In these unprecedented times we find ourselves in, we've seen a record number of people cast their ballots amidst COVID-19 pandemic. That speaks to an angst, no doubt, among a number of Canadians. But moreover, it speaks to Erin's positive vision. Erin's united this country. He's united Conservatives. And he's really built a winning coalition. He
says he's the one. The last question, one of his big pitches is that I'm the one that's ready to go. I'm in Parliament and I've got experience. Does that mean he should encourage and support the caucus voting non-confidence in this government when there's that confidence vote after September 23rd?
Well, ultimately, I think that'll be for Erin to decide. But what I can say on that is that I think it is important we have a voice in the Parliament holding the Prime Minister to account. Erin is ready to go on day one. Obviously, he's won his GTA seat 3 times, know what it takes to win in battleground GTA. But also, I mean, we have to, assuming that the Prime Minister does show up in the House of Commons, that we need someone there to hold him to account. And Erin, as he said, is ready to do that on day one.
Okay. Listen, thank you very much. Thanks for speaking with us.
Thanks very much for having me.
Peter, I'm joined now by Steve Outhouse, and he's campaign manager for Leslyn Lewis, one of the candidates in this leadership race who has impressed and who has raised a lot of eyebrows in terms of her support. Steve Outhouse, first of all, what do you make of how your candidate, Leslyn Lewis, has done so far in this race?
Well, we've been very pleased. I mean, she's come as a total outsider to the race and to politics in general. And so for her to kind of come in as a relative unknown and to start to kind of share her message and connect with the members, we're fast forward to the end, and she's in this. Like we've been fighting the good fight, and we're seeing a lot of support for her in fundraising and votes across the country. So we're excited about the results tonight, and we'll see how the members decided.
And first of all, apologies, because I just did something which is hard to beat, the habit of approaching a person with a microphone. So sorry for breaking that social distance.
No problem at all.
What do you think it is about her approach that is getting the support that she's getting? Because she is socially conservative, and she's made no bones about that. She's not apologized. And yet there's so much buzz and interest about her being the only woman candidate, and a lot of talk about reaching out to racialized Canadians, black Canadians, whatever.
Yeah, so I think her message has been one of staying true to conservative principles, but talking with that broader vision of how we need to grow the party if we're going to win. And yes, she is more a leadership candidate who is a social conservative rather than a social conservative who happens to be a leadership candidate. She's been putting forward a platform that appeals to fiscal conservatives, more on the libertarian wing, conservative principles, but saying that these conservative principles actually do resonate with a lot of Canadians who don't traditionally think about voting conservative. And she being the messenger, I think, in the next election could attract a lot of people who haven't traditionally thought about voting conservative.
She has talked about abortion legislation with regards to sex-selective abortion. 3 of the candidates have come out in favor of that. And she's also talked about free votes for members on matters of social conscience. But when this leadership race began, the conventional wisdom among a lot of commentators was that this party could not afford the debate surrounding social conservatism, that they've got to have a clean sweep and appeal to a much more, I'll use terms like broader, so progressive Canadian electorate. What do you make of that?
So I think, first of all, commentary is often wrong, but it's up to the members to decide, and then up to Canadians beyond that. But it was clearly an issue that a lot of people were worried about and concerned about. And so when she launched her campaign and we were starting to put forward platform ideas, we called it a no hidden agenda approach, just so that there could be one of the big problems in the last election was repeated allegations that there was a hidden agenda. And so for her to say, here's the 4 things that touch on abortion that I am going to put forward, and all members will have the right to vote their conscience, I think that built a lot of comfort from a lot of people. And they were the topics she's put forward about combating sex-selective abortion or coerced abortion in particular. These are things that Canadians feel actually pretty much in agreement about, that people shouldn't be coerced into these situations. So by putting it in a way that it was clear, it was articulated well, I believe, and people knew that here's the limitations, I think that built a lot of comfort.
What about people who say, though, she can be clear and she can say in these specific instances, just to take the abortion issue, these sex-selective and coerced abortion, but then people who say, yes, but it is a slippery slope to open, there's a party policy that says we are not going to revisit the abortion issue. What do you mean?
Yeah, well, I think that's why it's important to be very clear on it and say, like every politician, you get judged on your record and judged on what you do. And if she says this is what I'm going to do, and if she chooses to go beyond that, then people obviously have the ability to say, whoa, like that's not what you promised you're going to do. These would be steps, I think, that would be important to Canadians to have that debate and have that discussion. And frankly, even if it doesn't win in the House of Commons, it's an important debate to have. But that's where it is. And so people can decide on how she gets to be held accountable just like any politician.
The 2 candidates who have been called, for want of a better term, the presumptive front runners, the favored candidates, those who had a greater fundraising and more caucus support, Erin O'Toole and Peter MacKay. If she doesn't make it to the second ballot or the third ballot, who do you think, the people who are supporting your candidate, Leslyn Lewis, who do you think they would be the most prone to aye in terms of supporting?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about Dr. Lewis's support base is that it grew from the beginning. There was a lot of social conservatives that were there, and so obviously there would be a lot of crossover between she and Derek Sloan in certain ways. But as it's gone on and she's presented a broader agenda, there's people, like we have a lot of people who are now would be number 2 Peters or number 2 Erin's. So it's not as nice and neat and tidy as it might have been, you know, people thought at the beginning. And so I think it'd be very interesting if you know, not to speculate what's going to happen, because we're obviously in this to win it, but should she not, it'd be very interesting to see how that vote would break down, because I think that there's different people who see different things in different candidates that they like.
Last question. Obviously, the big question which will be asked of whoever is the leader and whoever decides maybe or maybe not to go to those flags behind us and talk after she is chosen. If your candidate wins, Leslyn Lewis, I would imagine that would not really speak to a snap election on a confidence vote, because she's not sitting in the House of Commons. Your advice to her as campaign manager?
Yeah. Well, we're going to look at what happens in terms of how she'll run or where she'll run and when she'll run after the leadership. That's my advice to her, first of all. But then after that, it'll be an interesting discussion as to what approach to do it. She has put forward a plan in the House. Obviously it was an issue that came up during the leadership of how will you hold the government to account without having a seat in the House, how will you do question period. And MPs Pierre Poilievre and Candice Bergen are able to step up and fill that role and hold the government to account on her behalf.
Last question. I don't know if I should know this, but has Leslyn Lewis committed to running for a seat if she should not win this?
Yes, she has. She said no matter what the outcome of tonight's vote, she will be running in the next election.
Okay, Steve Outhouse, thank you very much. I know you've been around in Conservative politics in many different guises and many different responsibilities. Thanks for speaking with me.
Thanks for having me.